Hello, my friends. I was out shopping yesterday on Black Friday and all, and I was waiting in the van while my wife ran in to do some Christmas shopping and didn't want me loitering about. So anyway, I was looking at some YouTube videos and I ran across one from I believe Runeslinger. That I'm sorry, I will include the link to his video below when I get this thing posted. And know that his topic was fear. And I'm not going to rehash what he was saying, but I'm going to put my 2 cents worth in on the topic and subject of utilizing fear in your campaign and as your game, as part of your game. The thing is, fear is not a comfortable scenario. It's in part it's a mechanic that's imposed on a character to give a realistic, or at least a mechanically based realism towards the character's reactions in a situation, in part because many players are not comfortable with the concept of utilizing fear, and many GMs are also not comfortable broaching the topic because it takes a bit of control away from their character, from how they play their character. And for those who are big fans of little or no rules and role playing everything out, that's fine and dandy. But majority of players do not have the level of consistency when it comes to that kind of empathetic mechanic of personal scale. So in order to what I'm saying is it's one thing to play a character who suddenly, or a character that's suddenly at fear for their life or at fear of a situation and try to role play it for a few minutes. It's another thing to maintain that same level of fear throughout the situation, the session or the encounter or what have you. And you can poo-poo it all you want, but the mechanics in these serve roles for a reason for a majority of people, and this is one of those cases. Fear is also approached in many different angles from depending on the game system. Call of Cthulhu, for example, and I don't know jack about Call of Cthulhu. I've barely looked at it. A friend of mine had it. I never played in it that I can think of. I've never been a big fan of horror genre of any kind whatsoever, and that's in part because. Not because I don't care for it, it's just not my gig. When I was raised in the 70s, 80s, folks, and this was the era of the horror flick. You had all the Halloweens and Jasons and Freddys and etc. and etc. And horror came in many forms. A lot of the Night of the Living Dead, the Walking, the etc. The old vampire movies and stuff. It's just, to me, I was overwhelmed with begin with, and second, it was more amusing for me to see other people get scared and then go at them in the middle of at a crucial moment in the movie and watch them jump out of their shorts. In the case of my mother, she never went to these movies because she had a weak bladder, and if you scared her, she'd have a problem, and then you might have a problem because you embarrassed her. The concept in games, though, there's a lot of elements that can be brought to the role-playing table that either socially or personally are offensive or problematic or a difficult concept for some people to cope with. And so in this more gentler, kinder era, we have a tendency or this need to be more cautious and careful. Once again, then, the mechanics of certain things such as fear have a prominent role or a pertinent role in scenarios. So when I look at stuff, and the concepts, also mine is how it's approached. Okay, and I know I'm kind of babbling here. In Star Wars, for example, fear plays a role in both the Jedi philosophy and the Sith philosophy. And if you know anything about Star Wars and you're moderately a fan of it, you understand the Jedi code includes that fear leads to anger, leads to etc., which is a bad thing. Fear is something to be avoided at all costs or to be overcome immediately. If you feel that you're becoming uncertain of a situation, or you're scared of a situation, get a grip on it, meditate, step out of the situation, step back. The Sith, on the other hand, views fear as an opportunity, as a battery, if you will, to motivate them to achieve their goals even more. They're going to use fear in their own case. They're going to embrace it, and they're going to control it. They're going to force themselves to do something and use the power of that fear to augment what they want to do, or they're going to use that fear as a tool against other people because they understand the motivations and the concepts of fear, and have a better grip on how just effective fear as a tool can be. So that is how that's played, or it can be played. And then there's the fear factor itself, the element of fear. And there are game systems that do a really good job of addressing this, and most of them they barely touch on. They barely get into the mechanic side of things. And so, when I was looking through things, and like I said, Runeslinger's video, and if I got the name wrong, I apologize. Like I said, I will post your video link below. Not that, the 20 or 15 or 20 people will see it. The 5 people that may see my video won't give a damn anyway. All right, it's not about that. So when I look at, this is 3.5, but this concept of fear that's in here has been in D&D since the get-go. There's some place in the earliest days we had access to the concept that's been a little more refined in here, but it's there. So within our realm, we have beasts and creatures that will cause fear out of presence, out of just their presence, or out of some, you come up against something like smog, and the first thing most people think is, oh my God, this thing's going to eat me, and it could eat me in one gulp, and oh my God, this thing is real. What do I do? And oh my God, I'm nothing compared to what this dragon's capable of doing. And some people would freeze on the spot. Some people would become desperate to want to survive, and thus become extremely susceptible to any suggestion that the dragon might say that might imply them including them not getting eaten or incinerated. And the list goes on. And there's other creatures that do this too. In a magic perspective, we have magic fear, and we have abilities to affect to project fear-like effects on other beings through magic. There are other stuff that, while is perceived as something else, is actually based on fear. So if you look at the Medusa, the Medusa's look turns you to stone. It's the fear of the Medusa that kills you before the stone takes effect, in my opinion. And you can argue that it's not that way, but that's fine. You're all entitled, everybody's entitled to their opinions. So when I looked at this back here, and it talks about fear. A young adult dragon charges the adventurers. Torek feels a twinge of fear, but grits his teeth, ignores it. Lita doesn't stand up as well with a charge. She holds her ground, but fear takes the edge off her skill. The cohort, who has recently joined them, however, drops the sword and flees recklessly, her screams fading in the distance. So what's happened here is all 3 made a fear check. Torek succeeds. No penalties. Lita fails, but fails mildly, and now has a negative penalty to everything she does, because she's in the grip of fear. And the third person runs screaming from the room. This person failed utterly, and probably will not be able to muster up enough courage to or be allowed to make another check to return to the situation. So they break it down into this aspect. Spells, magic items, certain monsters can affect characters with fear. In most cases, the character makes a will saving against resist to this effect. Failed roll means the character is shaken, frightened, or panicked. So they put it into 3 categories. Shaken means that the person is still functionable, is at a -2 for everything they do. This is attacks, saving throws, spell checks, ability checks, etc. A frightened character are shaken, and in addition, they flee from the source of their fear as quickly as possible. Once they are out of sight or hearing of the source of their fear, they can act as they want. However, if the duration of their fear continues, the characters can be forced to flee once more. So if this person that flees gets out of sight of the dragon is enough to slow down and still be in a panic, and that dragon comes around the corner, they're going to take off again. It's a given, right? But they have some control over how far or where they go, as long as it's out of sight of the thing that's terrifying them. The last one is panic, and panic is pure panic. You're going to flee, and you're going to flee in the shortest direction to what you think is safety. And I've always made people roll on a direction chart to see which direction their character flees, and then they take the path of least resistance. And it stipulates in here that if these people are running in a panic and they run into something else, potentially that other thing is going to continue that panic, and or they're going to ignore it and flee around it. So, becoming even more fearful. So it also applies that if you marginally fail and you have to make that second fear check, let's say the baby dragon's mother shows up and everybody's got to make another set of checks. You failed the first time on a moderate and you're at a -2. Now you're panicked because it's just too much, right? That's the mechanic concept. And people sit there and argue, well, it's too much rules, too crunchy. I don't see how this is crunchy in any form. It's very basic and very simplistic, and it leads a sense of realism to how the characters are played in a given game. So the fact that they have the possibility for getting the tar stared out of them is plausible. Now let's talk about something other than the game mechanic concept. Obviously, a big ugly dragon or a small dragon potentially eat you is a good enough reason for most mid to low level characters to have to make a fear check of some kind, right? Called a reaction check, because that's a lot of times it's considered a reaction check. At least it is in my world and has been for many, many, many decades. We don't call it a fear check, although there are a few game systems that actually apply it as a fear check, but it's usually a reaction to the situation based off of fear. Now, fear can come as a player, as the character, as the GM or storyteller. Fear can be applied in different ways. And one commonly used but often poorly recognized version of this is the gut reaction. Hence the term take a reaction roll is what the situation. So and so is doing something, such and such is happening. Make this roll to see how if your character reacts to it. And then it's up to the GM to quantify that. And ideally, the GM is going to have quantified this prior to having to make the reaction check. Sometimes you just have them make that random reaction check for a reason. So if anybody's familiar with, and it's Charles Bronson, I was trying to think of his name earlier, The Dirty Dozen is an old war movie where a bunch of these folks are in prison waiting to be executed or sentenced to really long times for various crimes while serving in the military in World War II, and they're being tapped for basically a suicide mission. And they need a certain quality of people who don't have a lot of qualms when it comes to killing people, and maybe in cold blood. And Charles Bronson plays a character who was put into a situation and reacted, and in doing so committed a felony in the eyes of the military. His officer at the time, they were in the middle of a hot combat situation, and many people got hurt and were dying around them, and the officer panics. He's a young lieutenant. He's never been in war in combat before, and he flips out and he bugs out. He runs away, and in the process he has the group's only bag of medical supplies, and he's running away. Charles Bronson is trying to save, as a fellow officer or a non-commissioned officer, I don't remember exactly, he's trying to save the lives of the rest of their group, and he watches the other guy get up and to run away and take the meds with him, and there's no time to rationally explain that to the officer or to check and balance him by tackling him and taking him down or what have you. So two sets of fear take place. Each one is a different perspective. The first one is the officer panicking. He's so scared of the situation. He's terrified, and he's terrified for his life. So he's going to flee, and he's not rational at this point. This is implied that he's not rational, and there's no talking to him, and he's not even aware that he's got the bag of medical supplies with him. Charles Bronson's character is in fear for the rest of his group. He's in fear that he can't help these people who are dying because his officer is running away with the medical bag. He's in fear that a lot more people are going to die here because of this guy's cowardice in his eyes, or this guy's panic mode, and he reacts. His reaction is not thought. It's not premeditated. he just shoots the officer because there's no time to tackle him or reason with him or what have you. He just shoots him dead to reclaim the medical bag that allows him to save the lives of an unknown amount of his fellow soldiers, because it's not brought up in the story. There's two different uses of fear in a scenario within a combat situation, potentially, right? That's just an example. So, and then I'll give you one other example, and then I'll cut loose on this. The other example I have is from a personal campaign I was involved in when I was in my late teens. A friend of mine was running the early D&D version game, and there was 4 of us in a group, and another friend of mine was playing a halfling mage. He was our magic user, flat out. So we go into this cavern, and suddenly the group's attacked by a bunch of spiders. And the character, everybody has to make a fear check to a reaction check to this sudden attack by all this ambush of spiders, big spiders. And he fails, and he flees, far enough away that he can't, so where he can't hear or see what's going on. In the process, the reason he fails more than the rest, because he's the one that was looking around, and he looked up and saw the huge monster spider on the ceiling that was starting to come down towards the group, the mother of all these smaller spiders. This thing is the size of a truck, and he freaks out and leaves, and he's unable to convey this to anybody in the group because it would be out of character knowledge. So he runs out, regroups himself, is allowed to make a check, and he's able to come back, but he's still in a panic. He's still in a fear mode, so he's already got negatives. He comes back, and he's forced to make that check again, because that's what the GM has him do. And so he fails the second check. Now he's in a really panic mode, and he's got even larger negatives on him, and he flees from the room, and he's unable to tell us as this giant spider's coming down. So he goes out, and he somehow manages to pull a 20. This is like unheard of. So he pulls a 20, gathers his ability to come back, slips back into the group, and holds it together long enough to fire off a fireball at the thing above us. Now, the thing above us is about 20 feet. And the fireball singes the beast, burns away all the cobs and webs, including the big thick one that the creature was using to lower itself down, and cuts it loose, and it basically falls 20 feet and lands on top of our group of 2nd and 3rd level, 4th level characters, whatever they were, and that was that. So he survives. The rest of us died. And it was both humorous and frustrating at the same time. And it was enough so that 40 years later, I still remember this story and this encounter. There you have it. Till next time, this is Rick, and you're seated at the table.